You guys, hello. Welcome back to Healing Unfiltered. I am so excited because if you're listening to this just via audio, I have an announcement. I am back with video. I'm so excited. I guess all it took was needing a new computer, unfortunately, but here we are. I have a new computer. I am ready to record video content again, get some clips out to you guys, get back on YouTube, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm really excited to have this feature back because I was on a roll with it. I was really liking it. I loved what it added to the podcast. And then my computer just decided to not want to work anymore. She couldn't handle it. She could not handle apparently what it takes to record video. And it was time. It was her time. So we're back and better than ever. And with a really, really great topic for today. We're going to be talking about all of the shoulds in life. In the world of therapy, we call this shoulding all over yourself. And that really is like the perfect analogy for it because should statements are really just adding extra weight to ourselves a lot of the times unnecessarily. And I'm not talking about like I should go to the gym, like it's time. I said I should go to the gym. I said I was going to, I guess I should. Sometimes it applies there for sure. But I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about like, oh my gosh, I should go to this event that I don't want to go to. Or what really made me think about it was I was having a conversation with a client who somebody important in their life, somebody influential in their life was in the hospital. But this person is somebody that they didn't have a good relationship with, that this person hadn't treated them very well. The relationship wasn't reciprocal. So it's a relationship with a lot of boundaries. And my client was like, my gut feeling was I'm not going to drop everything to go visit this person. So that's what she did. She maintained her boundaries. But at the same time, she was like, I feel like maybe I should have. Like maybe there was a part of me that was like, I should have gone to see this person more, been around more. I'm feeling guilty about that. Those are the shoulds that eat away at us so unnecessarily. And I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about why that happens, like why we even have these should thoughts. Why do they pop in if they're not good for us? And then of course we're not just gonna say, oh yeah, that's why. Glad I understand it now, and then move on. We're gonna learn how to challenge it and what to do with it instead of just accepting the weight of shoulding all over ourselves. So let's first talk about what a should statement actually is, and in the context of how it impacts us more so. So a should usually comes from some sort of internalized expectation. So this is an expectation that we hold over ourselves. I had a podcast episode a few weeks back about expectations. Really good one to go listen to because I basically say, fuck expectations. You don't need them to the extent that we expect ourselves to have them. But a should comes from some expectation that we establish for ourselves, really a lot of the times unnecessarily. So it's an internalized expectation. It is a moralized rule. So in the example of my client, it was somebody in their life that is kind of like it was a family member. So it was like, there's this moralized rule of we show up for family. My other family members are showing up for this person. I should show up in the exact same way, not considering my own boundaries, not considering distance, not considering my own life, my kids, my job, all the things that make it difficult anyway. So it's this moralized rule of essentially, if I don't do this thing that I'm saying I should do, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad wife. I'm a bad daughter. I'm a bad friend. I'm a bad whatever, fill in the blank. So we give ourselves these moralized rules that add this unnecessary weight over us. And it's also a story about who we're supposed to be. So it's this identity trap that we fall into of like, okay, so if I identify as a good human being, then shouldn't I do fill in the blank? Maybe sometimes, but again, we're looking at that as a very black and white, all or nothing thing when that might not necessarily apply. Just because you're a good human being doesn't mean you have to fall over and let shitty people in your life walk all over you, right? Or it doesn't mean you should show up for somebody if they're not showing up for you, or if you have other things that are a higher priority, right? Being a good human being doesn't always equate to doing things that we feel we should or shouldn't do. So we hold these stories about who we think we're supposed to be. And yes, those identity pieces are extremely important in who we are because they can be our moral compass. They can just help us identify with other people, help us build confidence in ourselves. But where those stories about who we're supposed to be, cause damage is when, again, they turn into expectations, or they turn into this like, well, if I don't fill in the blank, do what I think I should do, then I must not be this type of person that I think I'm supposed to be. Bottom line though, shoulds are not truth. They are not what add or hold value to you or your life. And they're not always aligned with reality. Shoulds are not always these things that should be the thing that keeps us on a straight and narrow path. They aren't the things that tell us what is right or what is wrong. Just because we have the word should attached to it, it makes us feel like it's what we should do. It makes us feel like what we have to do or not do. And that's just not truth a lot of times. It's not really necessarily the guide that we need to help us live the life that we want or have the relationships that better benefit us. So now talking about like where these things come from more in depth. Family systems, cultural expectations, gender roles, gender conditioning, religious or moral frameworks, all of those things, it makes sense it comes from that, right? If we see our parents bend over backwards for every single person and sacrifice themselves, and even if our parents don't place that expectation on us, but we observe it, okay, yeah, well, my mom was a great person. I look up to my mom, amazing. She did all of these things in order, if I want to be like my mom, if I want to be a good person like her, I need to do all those things too. I should do all those things too. And sometimes it does come from explicit expectations. It does come from a parent saying, you should do this. You should be a good person. And to be a good person, you should do fill in the blank. I think that a lot of times we look at things like religion and moral frameworks, and we take them for what they are, which is can be a very positive and supportive thing in our life. However, we need to look at both sides of the coin. And I'm especially talking to people who are raised in religious frameworks or moral settings, because when we're kids, we don't have the cognitive abilities yet to say, okay, this applies in this scenario, but it doesn't necessarily apply to every scenario. Kids are very black and white. Kids are very much like, I learned this concept, it's going to apply to everything else. I want you to take the example of a kid who is learning about animals. So if you have a little kid learning what a dog is, what a cat is, what a cow is, all that kind of stuff, they learn, okay, an animal that has 4 legs, fur, and a tail is a dog. Great. Now, every time they see a dog, they see the dog and they can label it dog. Oh my gosh, look, there's a dog. So exciting, whatever. Now, what happens when that little kid sees a cat? Well, their brain goes, okay, 4 legs, fur, and a tail. It must be a dog. That's what I learned. I learned that a dog, an animal that has 4 legs, fur, and a tail is a dog. So in that little kid's brain, they're automatically going to go to, even though it's a cat, they're going to say, oh, look, it's a dog. This, for a little kid, is really hard because our brains and our prefrontal cortex don't develop until way later in life. And so that logic and reason and that ability to kind of sort through information and decipher what might apply in one scenario versus another is really, really challenging. So let me full circle it back. Obviously, when it comes to the animal scenario, we have caregivers reinforcing like, oh, nope, let's correct that. That's actually a cat. We're learning different animals here, different rules for these things. Okay, so we have people to reinforce that. When it comes to religion and morals or like spiritual realms, it's very all or nothing. It's very do this to be a good person, love thy neighbor, like all of these things that are very straightforward, yes, and great concepts, but we don't, when we're little, have the abilities to sort through the fact that you can be a good person. You can be a God-fearing person. You can be a spiritual person. You can be somebody who believes all of these things, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing 100% thing. So I should fill in the blank can come from this all or nothing thinking. One of the things that we talk about in trauma work with clients is that fits into this category of kind of like your brain needing to adjust cognitively is if we're taught at a young age, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So be a good person and good things will happen to you, whether that's told to you explicitly through some sort of religious teaching, moral teaching, or just parental teaching, or if it's just implied, be a good girl and you'll get a treat, be a good boy and you'll get a prize. We're taught if I'm good, good things will happen, right? Well, then in the world of trauma, when something bad happens, like something really bad, you're like, what the fuck? I thought that good things happen to good people, and therefore bad things must happen to bad people. This bad thing happened to me. Am I a bad person? And then when we kind of add in there all the shame that comes with a lot of traumatic experiences, it can be one of the biggest barriers to processing trauma and getting to the other side of PTSD because of these things that are so encoded when we're little. So, full circle here with the should statements. If we're taught any of this at a young age, especially at that age when we can't cognitively sift through or sort through different scenarios where it might apply or it might not apply, or there might be some finesse to the situation, our brain is going to say, okay, well, I learned this a long time ago. X plus this equals this. Okay, I should do it or I shouldn't do it. So it's going to be really, really hard to challenge that. Another place that this does come from, speaking of trauma, is trauma and survival roles. What I mean by survival roles, so especially if you're somebody who has experienced chronic trauma, or you grew up in a traumatic environment, or maybe as an adult, you've entered some sort of traumatic dynamic or relationship or ongoing situation where the trauma isn't just an isolated event, it's an ongoing thing you need to protect yourself from. Survival roles are the roles that we take on within our identity to, like it sounds, survive. So if in my family it was very chaotic and I had to walk on eggshells and we had to tiptoe around mom or dad's mood, and maybe my role became the caretaker. My role became, I'm going to take care of everybody else to make sure nobody has any needs when mom or dad are around, and that will prevent mom or dad from getting set off, and everybody will be safe and everybody will be happy. Will be great, right? So that survival role of being a caretaker could translate into, I should take care of people. So in your adult life, that might translate into, I'm the one who takes care of people. I'm the one who does all the things for everybody else. I'm the one who manages the emotional dynamic of the situation. So these trauma environments and survival roles can absolutely be where these should statements come from. And this is really hard because it's a should in through the lens of survival. It's, if I don't do this thing, not only may I consider myself like not a good person or all those things we talked about, but my fight or flight might be activated, or I might feel like there's some sense of harm, or I might not be okay. So then this translates into why shoulds feel so convincing. When you have that moment, like my client who her logic brain was like, no, screw that. I have 3 kids. I have to get them to all these places. They have their own needs. I have my own family's needs. I have myself. I have my job. I have my loved ones. I'm not going to drive X amount of hours to wherever. Like, that just doesn't make sense for somebody who doesn't consider me. Her logic brain was like, yeah, that's a healthy boundary. Go once, visit the person, and come back and get on with your life. And other people will manage what needs to be managed for that person. But then the emotional brain kicks in and says, but you should go, because what if it means you're a bad person if you don't go, right? The reason that the shoulds feel so convincing is because they're so attached to this emotional weight. They're tied to our sense of belonging. They're tied to our fear of being bad. They're tied to fear of regret. This is a huge thing. Is, well, what if I don't do it and I regret it? I hear this all the time from people. Like, I don't want to regret my choice. And regret can be really, really tricky because, sure, you can make a choice and regret it. Absolutely. But we put so much emotional weight on regret because of all these other things. I regret it because, if we fill in that blank, what's the statement there? I regret it because, well, maybe I wish I would have made a different choice. Maybe I would have had a different experience. That's fine. That's healthy regret. Okay. Or I regret it because, this person got hurt and I regret that they were hurt. Fine. Healthy regret. But usually what it is I regret it because now I feel like a bad person. I regret it because now maybe they won't want to be my friend. Or it's some like extreme. It's something disproportionate to what the reality is. And usually we say that the emotion we're feeling is regret, but the emotion that we're actually feeling is probably shame and guilt, which is, I've talked about natural emotions versus manufactured emotions a bunch of times. If you haven't listened to my episodes about manufactured emotions versus natural emotions, please go listen to them. It's really, really helpful to understand this, because natural emotions is, like I said, that like when I was talking about healthy regret, natural emotion. Of course you feel that way. Right? Shame and guilt is that manufactured emotion that comes from these schemas that we just talked about. Your parents telling you, you better be a good girl. If you're not a good girl, people won't like you, right? All of those things come to these or create these manufactured emotions that just add unnecessary weight, unnecessary distress and pain. And so when we think about why these shoulds feel so convincing, they're really threatening. They're really, really threatening. Okay. So even to my initial example of, I said I wasn't talking about things like I should go to the gym. That absolutely applies if the should carries the weight of, well, if I don't go to the gym, I'm a lazy piece of shit. That is not healthy. That is not a good motivator for going to the gym. That's a great way to end up feeling like shit about yourself, whether you go to the gym or not. Because maybe you go to the gym this time, but what about the next time you feel like you don't want to go to the gym and you should? Well, then there's still going to be that, well, I don't want to be a lazy piece of shit, right? Maybe it's, I should go to the gym because I made a promise to myself. Oh my God, like that's so much more powerful than wanting to avoid being a lazy piece of shit. So anytime you have this should that is tied to something with so much emotional weight, something that maybe feels like it's connected to your character, your quality as a human being, your self-worth, your confidence, we have to examine that because that's going to be so convincing because that's the most important thing to us. The most important thing to us as human beings is our identity and our sense of belonging and our connectedness with others. And so if whatever is behind the should is a threat to any of those things, then we're going to feel the weight of that. And that's going to add to the feeling that whatever logic we have over here isn't powerful enough to overcome the guilt, the shame, the regret, whatever it is that comes with the should. So I already kind of touched on this, but I want to talk about the problem with this and the negative impact of living your life through the lens of should I or shouldn't I. Like I mentioned, it leads to this chronic shame and guilt, leads to this heaviness. It also leads to this erosion of your sense of self, this erosion of your confidence in your decisions, this inability to get in tune with your gut. Because if your gut is telling you, no, set a boundary, don't do XYZ thing, but then your emotional world is telling you, no, you should do it because you're bad if you don't, you're not going to learn how to trust your gut. You're not going to learn how to get in tune with yourself in a way that will allow you to make decisions that are in alignment with who you are, your values, your identity, your goals, all of that kind of stuff. So it just takes you further and further away from yourself, and it creates this kind of like breeding ground for self-betrayal. It's like we have these two versions of ourselves, and this is probably where I would take it in a therapeutic setting, is we'd probably go down the route of internal family systems of like, okay, which part of you is fearful of this outcome? Like which part do we have here that's kind of trying to take over the driver's seat and go down that route? Because it really is, we have these like devil angel, right? Of one hand, I have like this really strong intention and this gut and this intuitive instinct of what I should or shouldn't do. And then I have this shame and guilt of what I shouldn't or shouldn't do. And so what we're forgetting is that intuition, that part of you that is like logic, reason. I know myself. I've been here before. Let me put myself first. That is more in line with our core self. But then the fear and the guilt and the shame take over. And then it leads to betraying that core self. It leads to teaching the system we cannot trust the core self. We cannot trust this feeling of logic and reason. We need to lead with fear. We need to lead with shame and guilt. And that, like I said, is just kind of this breeding ground for continued self betrayal, which just takes you further and further away from living a fulfilling life. And like I said, being in alignment with who you truly are. The other thing that could happen with this is that it can lead to resentment in relationships. If we're constantly betraying our own boundaries or our own gut instinct or the things that we know are best for us because we want people to like us or we want to be a good friend or we just want to be a good person, we're constantly putting these other things in the priority. Well, eventually what's going to happen is we're going to have this inner conflict. We're going to get to a point where, okay, I'm starting to recognize that's not what I want, but I still keep doing it anyway. And then it's the cliche saying of we teach people how to treat us. So then other people are going to have these implied expectations of us. And then it becomes the norm. I'm the person who shows up, like my example in the caretaker role, right? I'm the caretaker. I'm the one who does it over and over and over again. And so other people learn to expect that from us. And then we can't override our logic side or our core self, and then we can't override that guilt and that shame and that should that fuels it. We can't get that core self to be in the driver's seat, so we keep on doing it. But then instead of looking inward and saying, hey, I'm going to choose something different for myself, we get resentful of the relationship. We get resentful of the fact that we keep showing up in this way, and the dynamic kind of continues and the role becomes ingrained. So this isn't only this impacts the self, and this impacts kind of how we experience relationships and life and all of that kind of stuff. It can impact the relationship as well. It can impact the health of your relationships. So, even more reason to kind of get ahead of it and get aware of it, because the last thing we need in healthy relationships is resentment. Resentment is truly, truly like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The only person negatively impacted or impacted at all by the resentment really is yourself. And that just eats away at yourself, because resentment is usually like that festering anger on the surface, but truly hurt underneath. And we don't show it as hurt. We show it as getting passive aggressive. We show it as getting angry. We show it as these ways that are really not vulnerable. And so it can just kind of lead to unhealthy relationships and unsatisfying relationships, really, is the bottom line. So these are kind of the problems we want to look for when it comes to using those shoulds, and why we want to be aware of them, and why we want to nip them in the bud and stop them if we can catch them. Okay, so how do we start challenging our shoulds? First of all, anytime you notice yourself saying should, I want you to notice it. I want you to truly notice it and pause and say, oh, that is a word I need to stop using. And I will do this in session. My clients probably get so annoyed with me, but I'll call attention to someone saying, I should do this, I should do that. And every time, like broken record, they say it, I interrupt them, like, oh, there it is again, right? Like, what's going on here? Just to kind of increase our awareness of the fact that we're doing it. It's very similar to when we're trying to break that habit of over apologizing, right? Somebody bumps into you at the store and you're the one who says sorry. Or, actually, I was leaving volleyball. I play rec league volleyball with some friends every week. And one of my friends on the team, I love this person. She's just one of the greatest human beings ever. But anyway, we're walking out in the parking lot and this car had their lights on, like they were about to reverse. And I said something like, oh, please don't hit us. And my friend is walking and she's like, oh, sorry. Like, please don't apologize to the car who might hit you. Like, they should apologize to you. So, like, things like that. So, anyway, a little tangent there. But just like we want to break that habit of over apologizing, we want to start to notice, how often am I saying should, and what's the impact? What are the situations that I'm saying should in? We need to notice the pattern first. So, if we can notice the pattern, if I can say, like, okay, I say should in situations where there's something expected of me in a relationship, or I say should when there's something that I think that I should do to better my life that I really don't want to do. What is the pattern? What are the types of things that draw this feeling out of you, and start to increase your awareness of it? So then we're going to add a simple filter to those moments. So instead of saying, what should I do or what shouldn't I do, we're going to ask some other reflecting questions. We're going to ask, what do I want to do? Okay. Because a lot of times when should kicks in, it's because there's a contradiction between what we want to do and what we feel like we need to do. And we need to first acknowledge what we want to do, because if we don't, then we're going to do the thing we think we should do. And then there's resentment, regret, all of these feelings that kind of lead us feeling unsatisfied. So we're going to first acknowledge what we want to do. A lot of times what I hear is people feel selfish. They're like, well, I want to do this, but I really should do this. This first step of just identifying what you want to do, I know it might feel uncomfortable. You don't have to do what you want to do. We're just identifying it first. We're getting you in tune with yourself to be able to recognize the difference between what you want to do and what you think you should do. Then we're going to ask ourselves, what actually feels aligned with my values? Because this is a good differentiator between what I want to do versus what I should do. So again, the example of going to the gym, where like it's the healthy, oh, I should go to the gym. Okay. So if I ask myself, like, instead of what should I do, the answer to what should I do is probably go to the gym. Okay. But if I say, what do I want to do? Well, I want to lay my ass on the couch. I want to rot. I want to make sure that my body feels comfortable, because the last thing I want to do is feel uncomfortable right now. Okay. So I want to do that. If I go to what feels aligned with my values, well, my values are wellness and health. Okay. Which decision feels aligned with my values? going to the gym, probably. But the nice thing about this is, let's say I'm having a really, really shitty day. Maybe I need a mental health day. Maybe I am sick. What feels aligned with my values, health and wellness? Well, if going to the gym is not going to be aligned with the health and wellness that I need for that day, then maybe what I want to do is actually the right choice. But you see, if we skip over that part, we're automatically going to, like, I should go to the gym. I'm shaming myself essentially if I don't go to the gym. So I know that's a very minimal example, but let's look at maybe a bigger example of setting a boundary with somebody. Okay. So let's say you have a family party that you're expected to go to. Okay. What I should do is go to the family party. What I want to do is not. I want to stay home and not interact with people who make me uncomfortable. What's aligned with my values? Okay. Maybe family is aligned with my values, but also what's aligned with my values is self-respect. Self-respect is one of my biggest values. So if I'm in a situation where going to this family party is going to hinder my self-respect or have a negative impact on my value of self-respect, then maybe what I want to do is the right choice. So you see how it kind of opens your eyes to, we're not just either being lazy or being a bad family member or whatever it is. We're starting to look at, yes, what do I want to do, but also what actually means something to me, not what means something to everybody else, not what means something to these like idealized things in my head, but what actually means something to me in relation to my own values. We can also ask ourselves what feels sustainable. Okay, so if passing on the gym today because I'm really tired, I didn't sleep good, I didn't eat well, like my body just feels off today. If that's more sustainable because I can take a rest day and then I can get back on track tomorrow versus forcing yourself to go through and then ending up resenting the gym. You can resent things other than people, by the way. That's a big one. Well, okay, that's sustainable. Okay. So we need to look at what is sustainable for us, not just for relationships, but for our own well being and our own day to day life. The last thing that we can ask ourselves, and this is a really, really important one, if guilt wasn't present, if guilt and shame were not present in the factor, they weren't in the room with us, what would I choose to do? So if guilt were not a thing, if I weren't worried about what other people would think of me, if I weren't worried about other people's expectations of myself, what would be the thing that I would choose? This is so eye-opening because a lot of times it highlights just how much guilt and shame are influencing our decisions. So not only are we having an emotion, which is not a fact, influence our decisions. We should never do that. I say never. Again, nothing is all or nothing, but we really need to make decisions from a place of clarity versus a place of pure emotion. But they're also manufactured emotions. They're not even natural emotions. They're not even the emotions we're supposed to be feeling in that moment anyway. So we're going to let these false emotions, not false as in they're not real, but these manufactured emotions lead us to making a decision that's never going to lead us to making a decision of what's best for us, right? So it can open our eyes to really paying attention to how much emotional reasoning we have at play. So again, reminder, emotional reasoning is when we use an emotion as fact. So I feel afraid, therefore I must be in danger. Not always true, right? So how much emotional reasoning is at play and how far away are we from the true emotional experience that is natural to whatever the situation is. What I want you to do when you start to notice the shoulds is I want you to shift your shoulds into curiosity. We're going to be curious about them, okay? So instead of I should call my cousin who I really don't like, I should call her. I said that as if I don't love my cousins. I love my cousins. I should call that family member I really don't like. Okay. Instead of that, I want to turn it into curiosity. I'm noticing that I feel pressure to call them. What do I notice? I'm noticing that I feel uncomfortable about the decision to call this family member. We're turning it into noticing. The thing about curiosity is it doesn't have to be action oriented. It can truly just be noticing, like, I'm really curious about that experience. Okay. So we're just noticing. We aren't jumping to an action. We are such fast paced human beings. If we would just take a fucking second to slow down, we think that every reaction we have, every thought we have, every emotion we have has to lead to some sort of action. No, I'm noticing I'm feeling this. Okay, then let it be. Let it sit. Okay, you don't need to jump on it. Even in situations where there's a clock on, you need to make this decision by this time, you can take 10 damn seconds to pause and notice how you are feeling. And those 10 seconds could actually make a huge difference in how you show up, how you make decisions, and how you get aligned with yourself and what is best for you. One of the things when we're noticing that I want you to really pay attention to is when you get through all of this, you kind of analyze, you ground yourself, you're looking at values-based decision making versus should-based decision making. Decisions made through values are always going to feel more grounding, even when it's hard. You're going to have this feeling of like, okay, yeah, that feels right. Even amidst, okay, that feels right, but that feels scary. That feels right, but that feels uncomfortable, putting it into action. We'll worry about that later when it comes time. The values-based decision making is always going to feel like, a deep breath, a sigh, a release in the shoulders. It's always going to have that feeling of like, yes, that feels right. And the more we interact with that feeling, the more we build trust in our gut, in our instinct, in our intuition. Shoulds always feel heavy, tight, fear-based. Basically, they always feel like shit, okay? So not only do we have this stark difference in how this feels, but we could have should-based decision making where that feels heavy, that feels like shit, and then doing that thing feels like even more shit. So we have double shitty feelings. Or we could have values-based decision making where we have that sense of this feels right. And then it still might be scary, still might feel like shit to do whatever we need to do. But the difference is we have that instinct, we have that building of trust in our gut, and we're not doubling down on the shitty feeling. We're starting from a place of, okay, this actually feels right for me. And then what we do with it, that's where it's kind of like muscle memory. It's going to feel hard at first until you build it up and you figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't feel so bad all the time. But we need to start to learn that either way, there's probably going to be some uncomfortable feeling. Making those decisions from a place of values and a place of alignment is always going to lead you down the path that feels more fulfilling and more in tune with yourself. All right, guys, we talked a lot about shoulds today, a lot about guilt and shame and the impact of all of this stuff on our system and our decision making and our trust in ourselves. This is something that I would venture to say impacts 99% of people, and from varying degrees, right? From like every decision we make, we're feeling this way, to just kind of interspersed throughout our lives. This is something that pops up for every single person. So I know you guys can relate to this to some degree, but as you're listening to this, I want you to think about what shoulds are weighing on you right now, or what was the most recent time you felt this pop up and you said to yourself, oh, I should do XYZ or I shouldn't do XYZ. I want you to reflect on that. And if it's a moment from the past, I want you to use that as an opportunity to like, well, what could I have done differently? Let's be curious about it, and not in a regret way, but in a learning way of let's be curious so that the next time it pops up, we can maybe evaluate a little bit differently. And if you have a should that is currently weighing on you, that's present day, run through some of those reflection questions that I mentioned here and really pay attention to the difference in feeling when you get to your values or what you know is right for you versus how this should feels. You don't have to put it into action. You don't have to make a decision based on all the stuff we're reflecting on. You can. I would love it if you did. I think that'd be a really great challenge to take. However, you don't have to. You can add the building blocks before you dive into the deep end of the pool. But the big thing is that we need to start getting in tune with ourselves and a little bit more aware of our emotional reactions to things and how to be more in tune with them so that we can make decisions that lead to a more fulfilling life. All right, you guys, I hope this was helpful. I'm so excited to be back on video again and give this as another way of kind of consuming the podcast. As always, I'd love to hear from you guys. I would love to hear what topics you have. What are you dealing with right now? What do you want to hear me talk about? What would be helpful for you guys? But also just let me know how things are resonating with you. Leave a comment, a rating, a review, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I will be back in a couple of weeks with another new episode. All right, guys, see you later.